Thank you, everybody, and welcome to the meeting of the school committee. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Just so everyone understands, first and foremost, this is unusual for us, first to meet on a Monday and second to meet at 4 o'clock, but it's in order to comply with state guidelines for our back-to-school plan, and that's why we needed to meet. As we get right before the superintendent's report, I'll go over that particular piece. So I do want to say, as usual, if people have questions, they can put them in the comment box. I'll talk about the back-to-school plan when we get to it. But the next item on our agenda is reports from school committee members. Does anyone have anything they wish to report on today? Seeing no one, I'll move on. So we will go to the superintendent's report. But beforehand, I just want to go over a couple of things with everybody, especially out in the audience. First and foremost is the back-to-school plan will be voted on by the school committee tonight. As soon as the school committee votes on the back-to-school plan, the superintendent will put the report on the district website later on this evening. That'll give you an opportunity to look at it. It's roughly 48 pages long, so you'll have a chance to read it over, look at everything. The very beginning of the pages all have to do with state guidelines that the state put out. I believe starting about page 32, it starts with the Middleborough plan that's really is for Middleborough. That being said, tomorrow night the administrators are putting on a live feed in which they'll answer additional questions from people. So we'll try to answer pieces tonight, and also we will try to, but you'll have an opportunity tonight and tomorrow to read the actual plan and then ask questions of the administrators. So at this point, I'll turn it over to the superintendent for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I certainly would invite Dr. Melanie Gates and Carolyn Lyons into our conversation, and we are going to, welcome ladies, we are going to once again go through this plan. It's a plan that you're familiar with. It's a plan that we talked about last week at a meeting, and although you did not approve it, it was a draft that went into the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education last week for their perusal. And at this writing, we have not received anything back from them, which basically what we've been told is that that's a good thing for your district. If there was something that they were really concerned about, that they would have let us know. So we're going to move forward with the plan that was outlined last week and talk about it a little bit. So if we could have the beginning of our slideshow placed up on the screen, please.
Sorry, it's the first time I've used my work device for this, and it's having connectivity issues.
Well, while Melanie's trying to find that, and I do appreciate that, Melanie, I'm going to talk first a little bit about we talked about the drivers for this plan and what really sort of drove us to make some of the decisions we made. And basically they come down to sheer numbers of students in a building at a time and adults in a building at one time, the transportation piece. But we also developed this plan using a set of guiding principles, if you will, which was an effort to focus our decision-making during these difficult times, as you know. And we have held these guiding principles at the center of all the decisions and will continue to ensure a clear focus on well-being, relationships, and learning for every student in every classroom and every day. And when I say every classroom every day, I kind of joked, and we've joked about it before, especially if we're hybrid, but those students will be getting an instruction at home. And that's the important piece. They'll be assigned to a teacher, and that instruction will be every day. So well-being, our return to school plan prioritizes the safety, health, and well-being of all the members of our school community. This principle is essential if we're going to be successful in our efforts to open our doors to this new normal, if you will. Every decision will be rooted in these key areas and will at times result in decisions that may not be convenient or easy to implement and make everyone happy. From the moment our doors open each morning to the closing each night, the health, safety, and well-being of our students and staff will be our #1 priority. Moving on, our second guiding principle is relationships. And relationships, we feel, and hopefully the school committee feels also, is they're essential to learning. With school reopening, it's important to place a focus on the rebuilding of relationships between students and teachers. All of our students will have the opportunity to remain connected to our teachers and to their peers in meaningful ways. The social emotional health of each student is paramount as we navigate the numerous challenges that so many of our students have faced throughout these last 6 months. Intentional work and time will be given to the engagement of teaching and learning and the power of these relationships. And the third is learning. And we are committed to ensuring that all students are learning as much as they possibly can under the circumstances that we're forced to take. And we want to focus on taking an approach that will move all students forward. We are committed to differentiating our approach to instruction by identifying and closing learning gaps which have occurred as a result of the past 6 months. We are committed to accelerating the learning for all students to ensure they master the key concepts and skills at each grade level. Lastly, we believe that learning is optimized when kids are engaged and excited, and we're committed to ensuring that our approach will be robust and meaningful, whether it be through a hybrid, or online, or in-person model. So that's sort of those are the guiding principles to this plan, and what were the intentional or internal drivers for putting this plan together. And let's go to the next slide, please. So the overview of the plan, or overview of the school plan, you see before you in a table of contents. As Rich Young has said, it's approximately a 47, 48-page document. I would like to credit the hard work and dedication of Melanie Gates and Carolyn Lyons for putting the lion's share, so to speak, I guess, of this document together. It takes a lot of hard work, a lot of organizational skills, and they've done yeoman's work to do that. So I first want to recognize the hard work of those two folks. I'd like to also recognize the hard work of our administrative team in putting these plans together at the building level and working hard to make sure that the return of school is smooth, whether it be in the hybrid model, the in-person model, and certainly our online learning academy is part of this plan also. So this contains, in addition to the guidelines that I just noted, this contains universal health and safety practices. This contains response scenarios for COVID-19 potential outbreaks, individually or in schools. It contains protocols for response to COVID-19 situation and for individual, I said individual exposure and moving down there. We thanked our coordinator of nursing for putting that information together. And also general procedures for regular cleaning and sanitizing and disinfecting. And Jim Hutchinson, our facilities director, has been involved in those. We've had good practice this summer with our extended school year program in place, and we thank him for his ongoing work there. We've also been in contact with our transportation providers, our own drivers that we hire for our special education services, as well as with First Student, and working out important details with them regarding the sanitizing of buses and the importance for PPE equipment used by drivers. And then it goes into the learning models and what our learning models look like, and we're proposing them to look like. And then going on to special education and cohorts involved in special education, and then student supports for professional learning. That particular question came up last Friday, at a seminar that we had with regard to a sort of an invitation-only group, representative group. So we added some of that additional information as of this morning. So it's a work in progress and will continue to be a work in progress. And if you saw at the very beginning, there was a disclaimer that we're going to post. And it says just that this is a fluid plan, that we have to be ready to turn on a dime. We have to be ready to transition at any time. If we go backwards with regard to the sort of the healthy direction we're headed in right now in the state, but if things get worse like they have in other states, we have to be ready to go all remote if we need to, and we'll be ready for that, and we will have that in place with teachers and work at home. So we continue to wait. We have guidance that has come out. Obviously, there's a whole list of those guidance documents that have been published. And as that guidance changes and comes out more, or more comes out, then we'll continue to look at this document and revisit it if we need be. And we'll obviously revisit it with the school committee in place so that you hear all about it. Nothing will be changed administratively without notification to school committee. And if the entire plan needs to change somehow, some way, then the school committee would be asked to re-vote on that. So let's move on that. So we're going to now move to the cohorts and again describe them for folks maybe that weren't tuned in last week or that haven't been tuned in yet with this plan. And I'm going to let Dr. Melanie Gates sort of describe these cohorts, and also Carolyn Lyons are going to work. We'll talk about the special education department and the cohorts there. So Dr. Gates, welcome again. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Lynch and school committee members. This is the same cohort model that we had shared initially, where we are anticipating that we will have 4 cohorts running at the same time. Cohort 1 will be our full in-person group of students. These students will be identified in accordance with the guidance provided to us by the state, and Mrs. Lyons will be speaking more about that as we continue through the presentation. But these students, which will be a small group of students from across the district, will be in person each day in both weeks A and B. Cohort 2 and 3 represent our hybrid cohorts, where students will be in school for part of the week and online for the remainder. We know that many communities have chosen a different model for Middleborough, being a week in and a week out model. However, we felt really strongly that we wanted to be able to see our children each week to maintain that connection, to support their well-being, to help us cultivate relationships, and to help us stay on point with the learning that's needed for our students. So if you're in cohort 2, on week A, you would be coming to school in person on Monday and Tuesday and online Wednesday through Friday. In week B, these students will come to school on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and be online for just Thursday and Friday. The opposite will be true for those that are within cohort 3. These students will consistently have online engagement on Monday and Tuesday, while being in person on Wednesday through Friday of week A. And in week B, these students, again, that consistency of online Monday and Tuesday, will add in a third day of online learning on Wednesday, and students will then be in person on Thursday and Friday. We also know that we have members of our community who will have a preference for remote-only learning, whether it is for their child's medical needs or other scenarios. We know that that is an option that our families will need. So in essence, each of our schools will be somewhat simultaneously running 4 different schools within them. And we felt that this approach really took into account what we believe in and value. Again, as Superintendent Lynch said, it's the well-being, relationships, and learning piece, taking that into account with the guidance given to us from the state. And we felt that this plan was best for us to help meet the needs of our students. We know that this rotation of days in and out of school is not going to work for every member of our community. And there's really no one model that is going to work for everyone. So we made our decisions based upon what we felt was going to be in the best interest of our students and the best interest of our faculty and staff as well. In addition to having the options provided by those cohorts, families also reserve the right to homeschool their children. Now, homeschooling is different than the remote-only plan in that homeschooling means that our families will be choosing the curriculum and deploying the curriculum, independent of what it is that our schools are providing. If you are interested in homeschooling your child, you do need to complete a notice of intent to pursue a home education program. And within that, you will be identifying your curriculum and the subjects to be taught, as well as resources. You have to verify that you will meet the time on learning requirements. You will also identify the academic background of those who will be providing instruction to your child, as well as identifying the end of year assessments meaning the results that you will be sharing with our homeschool liaison. So again, homeschooling is different than remote learning. Homeschooling, the family has the choice of what is the curriculum and what is the schedule, and that is done independent of what happens at the school. If you are interested in homeschooling, again, you do need to complete a notice of intent to pursue a home education plan, and that plan can be sent to me via traditional mail to 34th Street here in Middleborough, or you can send it to me electronically via my email shown here, which is melanie.gates@middleborough.k12.ma.us. If you do have questions about homeschooling, please feel free to reach out, and we'll do my best to help address those with you. But in our overall model of how we are anticipating to support teaching and learning, it is really going to be put into action based upon the selections of our family. And what I mean by that is for those who are opting for remote only instruction. That information is going to be very critical for us in determining then our cohort placements in both cohorts 2 and 3. So once our school committee, if they are able to accept our plan as presented, we will be pushing out this information to members of our school community, where we will be asking that if you would like to participate in our online learning academy, which is our remote only option, then we ask that those families complete a registration form by 9 a.m. Next Monday. We know that it's somewhat of a tight window, but the identification of our students that will be in the online learning academy is critical for us to then determine the rest of our cohort placements. Our online learning academy is going to mimic as best as possible the typical school day that our students will see when they are coming to school in person. It will be a structured learning day where there will be direct instruction provided by our teachers to our students, supported by some supplementary online resources. It will look very much different than what we had during the spring for school closure. Attendance will be taken, grades will be issued, and we're going to mimic the schedule of the school day so that when we do transition back to full in-person learning, it is a bit of a smaller leap for our students. So we will be keeping the same start and end times for the school day, as well as keeping a very similar structure to the time on learning components as we do during our typical school of in-person learning. Now, the time on learning requirements are dictated by the state, and we have to show evidence that we are meeting those requirements, both for our in-person and hybrid, as well as this online learning academy. Again, a Google form is going to be transmitted upon the conclusion of our school committee meeting, and we ask that if you intend on your child participating in the online learning academy, that you register your child for this by 9 a.m. Monday, August 17th. Mrs. Lyons?
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Gates. What I would like to do is walk everyone through the 4 cohort models for special education and how that, cooperates with the plan that Dr. Gates was just discussing. Before I do that, I want to talk about a couple of items that are important for all special education families to know before we get into the weeds on cohorts. Regardless of what cohort your child is in, all students will receive all services in their IEP. This is a difference from how we operated in the spring when on the fly we put plans into place. Going forward for the 2021 school year, families can expect that their IEPs will be fully implemented, and families can also expect to hear from our special education contact people to develop what ultimately amounts to a student learning plan, if there is going to be any difference between that IEP service delivery grid and how the families and the district see fit in terms of implementing it under the lens of the 4 cohort models. I'll come back to that point in a minute. What I want to do is start with cohort 1. This has been a topic of discussion throughout the special ed community since we started talking about it. The state guidance told us that we were to prioritize and we agree to prioritize certain populations of student in this, new iteration of education. That includes students with the highest level of need, and then some select populations like the pre-K population, students who are homeless, students who are eligible for foster care or congregate care, and students identified as English learners. So just a note on that, because I've received this question a couple of times. If you could go to the next slide, these populations that I'm talking about are actually on that high level of need slide. I wanted to just reiterate that students in our pre-K program are made up of students in integrated classrooms and students in substantially separate classrooms. So if you have a child in the pre-K program that goes or attends in-person school 2 days a week or 3 days a week or 4 days a week, that is what they would do in the year to come. I know that in our previous graphic where we talk about cohort, it says 5 days a week, but that is to indicate that special ed programs will be up and running 5 days a week. So if you're assigned to a program 2 or 3 days a week, as indicated in your IEP, that's what would be implemented. And then the same is true for students who are homeless, students in foster care, and students who are dually identified as English learners. So if you want to go back to the previous slide, now I can talk about this highest level of need because it is confusing. The state ultimately gave us the criteria of using the PL3 form, the primary disability level of need form. And it ultimately told us that students who meet at least 2 of that 3 criteria up top qualify. So if you look, that indicates that this is a type of student whose services are provided outside the general ed classroom, provided by special education teachers and related service providers, and also constitute more than 75% of the student's school day. Now, unsurprisingly, Middleborough Special Ed Department drew the line a little bit more broadly. That first bullet under the second paragraph, additional qualifying criteria, will also include all students in our specialized programming, regardless of needs designation. So we have specialized programs here in the district. And for you families who have students in these programs, you already know what I'm talking about. But regardless of whether a student meets that highest level of need designation by the state form, what our department has decided is that if your student is assigned to one of those programs, they will be up and running 5 days a week. It remains to be determined how many days your child may participate, and that will be an individualized process based on the IEPs for each student in that program. It may make sense for your child to attend that program 1 to 3 days a week. It may make sense and be more in line with what your student previously experienced to attend that program 5 days a week. What we'll be doing is undertaking an individualized process to make sure that what we are offering is in line and in the spirit with what the student's IEP says and what the student has known in the past. So to give you an idea, as I've just said, these are students in specialized programs, but to further give you more definition, it includes students who have primarily Grid C services with minimal inclusion services, students with multiple related service providers like speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and behavior-based services, and students with multiple areas of concern within the classroom. So it wouldn't just be learning needs, or it wouldn't just be social emotional needs. It could be a range: social emotional, behavior, sensory, communication, learning. It also includes students who have the use of an AAC or augmentative communication based need would also be included in this highest designation, and students who cannot engage in remote learning due to their disability related needs. So when I'm talking about cohort 1, what I'm talking about is a smaller percentage of the entire student special ed population. Most students will be in cohorts 2 and 3. So if we want to go forward, I can talk a little bit more about what cohorts 2 and 3 look like. In cohorts 2 and 3, which again, recall that 2 and 3 really are the same, just on a reverse schedule. These are students who will be, again, receiving all special ed services listed in their IEP. We know that from cohort 1, these students would not be designated as highest level of need. They'd be designated under moderate or low needs under that same PL3 form. And these students would meet at least 2 of the 3 criteria listed below. This includes students who receive a combination of services either entirely in the general education classroom or a combination of inside and outside a special education classroom. This includes service providers as a combination of either simply general education teachers or general education teachers plus special education teachers and or paraprofessionals and related service providers. And special ed services for these students constitute less than 75% of the student's school day. These students still receive all of their IEP services. However, they're going to receive them through our hybrid model. How would that functionally occur? Means accessing remote services, accessing in-person services. It also includes in-person related services and virtual related services. It also may include tutoring services and home-based services depending on the individual needs of the student. So once again, we're looking at having a special education person reach out to families to talk about how to best implement this program. And last is Cohort 4. So if you want to go to the next slide. This is a family-driven choice that Dr. Gates was just talking about. And any family may elect this model without the need for medical documentation. Regardless of accessing a full remote program, all IEP services would be delivered. That would be provided through a combination of services that are virtually based, however. That could include tutoring or home-based services, as well as virtual instruction and virtual related services. So hopefully that brings some clarity to the special education overlay of this program. I would invite all special ed families, not just to tomorrow's Q&A session, but to keep their ears open. I know that our CPAC, who's been active and very involved and part of our process in terms of consultation, will be looking to host a meeting this summer prior to the start of school to answer more questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn.
And
Thank you,
speaking of
Melanie.
questions, we do have a frequently asked questions document that's in development that at the conclusion of this evening's meeting will be shared with folks. We will continue to update this as questions come in from the community that we feel could be shared with others. So please be on the lookout for this document. In addition to is the event that's been referenced by both Chairman Young, Superintendent Lynch, as well as Mrs. Lyons. There will be a Q&A with administration that will be held tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. It'll be hosted through StreamYard, where you'll be able to find it through our Facebook pages as well as our YouTube channel. And this is where we can get into more granular information at more of a building level to help families in making the decision that is best for them.
Thank you, Dr. Gates. Are there any questions from the committee or questions that through the committee, Mr. Young, if you'd like to ask them?
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a couple of questions and I'll do what I did last time, which is take a couple of questions that I see on the chat list. I'll move it to school committee members when I need a little bit of break. Some questions we'll be able to answer. I would remind people at home, again, about tomorrow night's event, because later tonight, the document will be posted. You'll have a chance to read through it, and then you can go tomorrow night to ask your questions. So the first question I received: will the online days of hybrid model consist of pre-recorded lessons so that families can have flexibility to do the lessons? First and foremost, I'll answer that one because right now we're in negotiations with the union. So I cannot promise anyone that those lessons will be recorded. That's the first thing. The second question up is, will remote learners be taught by their classroom teacher, or are those assigned a different virtual teacher? Brian?
Okay, and I can certainly get Melanie's input on this, but our intention is that every student will be assigned to a full-time licensed Middleborough teacher. And whether they be in the online learning academy or the cohort. With the cohort, it'll be 3-2, then 2-3 over the course of 2 weeks. And they'll be working with their same classroom teacher. And those cohort days on the off days will be basically set up like a school day. There'll be interactivity between the teacher and the student. between the students and students, and there'll be the ability to do small groups and the like. So the teachers, the virtual teachers, will not be from some other area or state or country. They'll be Middleborough teachers, licensed, certified Middleborough teachers who'll be working with them. That's the importance, Mr. Chair, and the committee, of identifying the amount of students that are going to be in the online academy, because that will make a determination on how many teachers we need to teach the online learning academy. And so that's why that's, again, and Dr. Gates talked about the importance of that, and that's important. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Dr. Gates?
No, I think you captured it well. Knowing the number of students is critical. As families are making their decision of whether or not they would like their child to come back into school in the hybrid format, choosing the remote piece will allow us to determine how to distribute our staff and how much staff we're going to need to support the remote piece. How we envision the remote is having a teacher. So if it's, let's say we had 20 kids at first grade that wanted to be remote, we would have one teacher assigned to those 20 kids, and we would essentially make that teacher's classroom. So we do not want our teachers focusing on both in-person and remote teaching, because it doesn't allow them to best meet the needs of the children that they are directly servicing. So with our model, we are focused on making sure that our teachers can maximize their engagement with students in a particular modality. So the teachers that are teaching solely remote would have just that entire class. Now, it could look a bit different at the secondary level, particularly at the high school, where our schedule at the high school has been traditionally driven by student requests. Our kids get to choose what classes it is that they want to take. So Mr. Brannigan has really been burning the midnight oil. I know he worked all weekend long looking at individual student schedules and determining the best way to support our students' needs. And we will be using our faculty in a way that also helps us support our remote students. So a teacher might, by chance, have if they teach 3 out of the 4 blocks at the high school, they could have 2 blocks where they're teaching kids in person, and then 1 block where they're teaching an entire remote class. But for the K through 8, we will essentially be creating remote classrooms where we can dedicate our faculty and staff to that, instead of using some online learning provider to do that.
Okay. The next question is, if a family chooses to go completely remotely, will there be opportunities to meet teachers and or other classmates in person?
Meaning in person online or in?
I think in person at some point, in some way, shape, or form, Brian.
That's a good question. I think that's the first time we've heard that. I would say that we would certainly try to facilitate something. Once we identified that group and identified a socially distant place where they might be able to get together safely. For example, the Nichols Auditorium might be something that's used. I'm not sure we could do it with every classroom situation, but if there was a desire of a particular class to do something like that, we could probably accommodate it. But it was definitely something we can work on with the administrative group and kick that around. So we'll have maybe a definite answer for that tomorrow night.
I would just like to add to that, if I may, Superintendent Lynch, that some of our teachers that are choosing to be a remote teacher, it may be based upon their own medical needs. So we would have to be respectful of the needs of our faculty and staff too, in having exposure to folks, particularly if the reason that they are a remote teacher is to eliminate or reduce that exposure.
Good point. Thank you.
The next question is it the expectation that on either virtually, if you're completely remote, or on remote virtual days, that a child is on the computer for the length of time of a school day?
There'll certainly be a lot of engagement with the computer, because that's the modality of delivering instruction, and supporting it with some supplementary programs such as PreK for the elementary level. But I'm sure that our teachers, because it's the whole reason we want to use our teachers to deploy our curriculum, is they can create non-tech-based engagement for our students. But I think that will vary by level as well as primarily by level, based upon the type of activities that are being designed for that. But I would say it is going to be a larger percentage of screen time, which is not something we strongly advocate for. But given the circumstances, it's really the vehicle that will allow us to provide that safety that some of our families need for them and for their children who are in medical need.
Somebody asked about before and after school care. It is the plan to have before and after school plan. We do not know if before and after school time will be available for non-days in the building. And for example, if you're on the Monday, Tuesday cohort, we may not be able to accommodate you on Thursday, Friday. We're still working that out with Champions. So that's a piece that we're working out. Correct, Brian?
Correct.
Okay.
Mr.
Carol?
Yeah. I'm seeing some of the questions come in as well, somewhat related to what I was speaking about with remote. And, I've seen just some comments about grading and because families are at work that they're not going to be able to be there to support their child. Part of what we are instilling upon our children is learner behaviors, that we want to see students demonstrate perseverance, to utilize the resources available to them. We're not looking to have families do what we did in the spring, where you're sitting alongside your child doing the teaching for our staff. That's why there will be a increased amount of online engagement, because our teachers are providing that direct instruction. And the activities that we want our students to be engaging in following that are ones where we don't expect our parents to be sitting alongside of them. Students will, again, use their learner behaviors that we have been encouraging in our schools for quite some time. It's not just about getting the right answers. It's about, did you know how to approach the problem? If you didn't know how to approach it, did you use different strategies to help you learn to find your entry point into a problem or an activity that you're working on? So, we know that this is a burden on our families. And if we could bring all our kids back into our schools to have school as normal, we certainly would. But we know that the remote option is something that is of need for families, and we hope that the way that we structure it is not an additional burden onto our parents. So we're not looking for you to sit alongside your children and teach them during that day. We hope that how we deploy it, students can be largely independent with the work that we would be asking of them.
The next question is for you, Caroline. How will we assess new students entering kindergarten to assess and evaluate them if they have special needs?
So this process goes on throughout the K year, even in years where we've done a formal K screening process in the spring. Mr. Gobeil, is not here this evening, but he and I have had conversations about how we can embrace a K screen model this coming fall. And I don't know that that's been fully decided as of yet. And regardless of that process, student identification through child find occurs every day in our classrooms. Ultimately, when teachers are seeing students, there is a process that is undertaken to determine their need. And that would not differ this year than it would in previous years. What I'll say is it will take some time for students, even incoming K students who had been away from their previous programs last spring, to give them time to settle into their program and determine which students are where. So I would anticipate that the child find process would continue. The identification of students with disabilities would continue this year as it would in any other year. At various points, students will be in front of teachers and learning from our teachers, and our teachers will be and are continue to be equipped to assess that need. Does that answer that question, Chairman?
I think so,
Okay.
Caroline. I'm going to stop for a minute with the lessons online and go to school committee members if they have particular questions while I am reviewing the questions. Mr. Oakley, go right ahead.
Thank you very much. This question is for Carolyn. Carolyn, I'm trying to learn more every day about the different processes that we have to handle special education in Middleborough, and obviously to provide these services. And I wondered, I guess this is mainly motivated by a question from a parent that I had this weekend. With the exception of students who are maybe not yet known to your department as maybe having special needs, what is the process like to determine who fits into Cohort 1? And do we already have the information to know who's in Cohort 1, obviously accounting for parents that want to pull their
Sure.
kids
I mean,
into fully remote?
we do largely know already who would be included in Cohort 1, because we already have an idea of students that are in our specialized programming. In either they were in it last year or they are slated to be in it this year. So in terms of the students that fit into that aspect of Cohort 1, we do. Same with students who have AAC-based needs, students who are touched by homelessness and foster care, and students in the pre-K program. We've already undertaken a process to identify all these students. So they are largely known. The issue will be communicating out to families, your child is in Cohort 1, and this is how we plan to address those services. Because as I stated earlier, not all students in Cohort 1 solely attend a specialized program all day long. So that's going to take a degree of communication and collaboration to come up with what the best plan is. So I think that was one of the questions you asked. Do we already know who's in Cohort 1? And, to a large extent, that answer is yes. But then we also do need time to communicate that out through our special education contact people. I will say that communication can begin this month, but I would caution families that we have that initial 10 days before school begins, and that's when the majority of communication will be occurring. That's when our teachers are back, and largely our special education contact people are teachers. So I wanted to make sure I made that clear. Was there a second part to that question I missed?
No, I guess the only part that I was curious about is so we already know who's in Cohort 1 for the most part, but what we don't know is if parents will choose to opt their students out of in-person. Is that correct?
Correct. We are very much waiting for the survey for families to indicate, because it's really hard for us to know. We have several children with very significant medical needs, as an example. And medical needs wouldn't be the only reason a parent or a family might elect Cohort 4, might elect full remote. So we really do need to get a handle on that. And then, not to muddy the water, but there is one additional criteria in Cohort 1, which was for students who cannot engage in remote learning due to disability-related needs. And what I would say is, if you're a family who feels that your student fits into Cohort 1 with the specialized programming that we have not identified, that would trigger some type of conversation. So those students, I wanted to create lines that weren't so rigidly drawn so that families were left without, any means of communication or conversation about it. But that process still needs to unfold. And to be fair, not every special ed student can be in Cohort 1. If that were the case, we'd be looking at a return to full in-person, full-time learning. So I want to make sure I make that point as well.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Stevens, you had a question.
Yeah, it just has to do with when a family decides on, let's say, Cohort 4 for online learning, when can they change? Would it be by semester or by year?
As a group of administrators, I think we all agree that there's certain benchmarking times, I think, that need to be adhered to. For example, the end of trimesters, the end of grading periods, that would make sense for folks who are grading at home. Remote teachers grading, and then in-person cohort teachers grading, different teachers. So I'm thinking that what we'd do and what we're trying to do, that's what we're going to do, is sort of limit folks to those periods during the time of the year where there's a natural change and a periodic change, unless it were some type of an emergency situation. Obviously, if somebody that has to change for whatever reason that might be.
Ms. Farley, you had a
So
question. I'm sorry, Greg, go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No, I just wanted to follow up. So if somebody had a special situation, they could always
course.
talk to you. If their
Absolutely.
home situation changed.
Ms. Farley, sorry.
Thank you. This may be in the plan to return. I have not fully read it. I apologize. But I did want to know, this came up quite a few times. Will parents be asked to fill out some type of liability form? I know something maybe had gone out this summer for the ESY program, Ms. Lyons. Would that be similar to what the school year form would look like? Just the liability for the school and the parents and anything like that?
So we didn't, just to kind of give you an idea, over the summer, we didn't have the families sign any type of liability waiver. What we did was we, had a communication with families so that they could fully understand what our practices would be in terms of the use of face coverings and cleaning and sanitation. And we did certainly make the statement that we can't guarantee that a student returning to the school building would not come in contact with, COVID-19. We certainly made that statement, and I would encourage us to continue to make that statement because there really is no promise there. Even with the best laid plans and the most careful planning, it just wouldn't be realistic to do that. But I'll defer to Superintendent Lynch. I'm not aware of a liability waiver, so to speak.
No, and we have not been asked by anyone, our insurance company or otherwise, to provide that. But I do agree with Ms. Lyons' statement about the fact that a general disclaimer would be that there are certain things that we can't control.
Sure.
And that's why we have the options we have, so that folks, if they really feel that there's a strong potential, we feel there's not that strong of a potential. But we're going to do everything we can to prevent everything we can prevent. But there's always a chance. And I think that we always need to sort of claim that and let people know that we'll do the absolute best we can. And
Absolutely.
that's within our possibility, within our realm of possibility.
Thank you.
I'm going to just jump to a few of the outside questions first. For those who put questions in, I will try to get to them, but I want to point out some of the questions have already been answered. So, for example, these will be Middleborough teachers doing all phases of it. That's our intention. It is also, it is not a different teacher on in-person and remote days. So if I skip over the question, more than likely the question's been answered previously. So I just want to go from there. Brian, there is a priority for families as far as trying to match up days for their children across the spectrum, right?
Yes, our principals are fully aware of that, and we're definitely trying to do the best we possibly can with matching up families if parents so choose. We've also heard the other end of that if they're going to be home, if parents are going to be home, they might want different students home on different days too. But for planning purposes, I think the majority would like probably all their kids in one cohort and not in the other, or vice versa. So we're going to try to honor those. And again, it's going to be something we'll probably be able to do most of it. But the high school schedule is going to be much trickier, and it's much more complex schedule. So we can certainly try that. And it may end up being perhaps more grade level based with regard to MCAS testing and such at the high school level also. So we definitely will try our best to do that. It's already being done, to tell you the truth, at the building level.
And Brian, the second part to that too is families that are trying to work together for caregiver arrangements should really notify principals, and we'll try to deal with that also.
Yes, we'll try to work on that too. We realize, as Dr. Gates had said earlier, and I've stated before, that this is not the best plan for parents. Absolutely. I'm a parent of a sixth grader myself, and it's not the best plan for myself or my wife, where we both are educators, and we're both in different towns on different schedules. So, unfortunately, I think we all have to get as creative as we possibly can with this. And And I know you don't have as much time, folks out there. I know you don't have as much time to plan because this is what we've been given. The guidance has been coming out all summer. This was the deadline. Today is the deadline, but they've extended the deadline to August 14th. But we're going to put in our information today to, even if it's just 4 more days, that you have the plan as a family for childcare. So.
And the question was asked, so I'll just, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but for middle and the high school, it is not one teacher per classroom. A child can have multiple teachers.
Correct.
Okay.
That's definitely in middle and high school. We did respond to some questions from the past meetings about in the middle school about kids changing rooms. And I think that I know we've decided at the middle school where the students will stay in the same room and the teachers will move around, thus eliminating the need for sort of the cleaning of every single desk every time a class changes. So, although we all understand that COVID is not really a contact piece, it's more of it's airborne, but still.
Okay, 1 second, Greg. I want to ask Caroline. I want to ask you one question that came up. If a child has an IEP with tutoring services, is there a cohort that they need to go into to get those tutoring services?
So without knowing the context, I'm not sure how to answer that. I assume that that's not the only thing in the student's IEP,
Okay.
but let's answer that question both ways. Let's assume the student already has a whole host of services in the IEP plus tutoring. They'd already be in a cohort. Let's assume the student receives tutoring services, but potentially isn't here in district for any particular purpose and so wouldn't be in a cohort. What I'll say is if we contracted out for tutoring services before, we would do so again. I would also anticipate that tutoring services may take place in a variety of formats. I know we've had some success over the summer administering online virtual tutoring, and I would anticipate that would continue as well.
Okay,
does that answer your question?
It does. And just as a related question, because it was another special needs question, has there been consideration for faculty and staff to use clear masks for children with deaf or hard of hearing problems?
Yes, we've talked about this not just in the context of the DHH community. You know, many students with autism also have deficits, particularly in reading things like facial expressions. So, you know, a happy face doesn't necessarily look happy, or a sad face, you know, that correlation isn't there. So clear masks are very much going to be part of the plan. Now, we've asked families to provide their own PPE, their own face coverings. And I realize that not every parent's going to have access to that style of equipment. So I've been in conversations with central office about creating a special order so that additional equipment can be obtained. I got a lot of questions about wearing just a face shield, and I can tell you that a face shield alone isn't going to be enough because those face shields are clear and they're very handy, but the guidance is very clearly telling us it's a face covering and a face shield. So you're really talking about a clear view mask. And I do anticipate obtaining those and using those throughout our programming here in the district, not just with the DHH community.
Greg, you had a question. Greg Stevens.
I just want to ask about the deadline that Brian was talking about. I think today was the first day we could actually publish that.
Correct.
Our plan, right, from the state, because they were still
that's correct.
Looking at it
that's
last
correct,
week.
Greg. This is the first day
So
that we could publish. We've tried to get the word out what we were going to do without having it state approved yet, but this will be the final approval of this will lie with the school committee tonight. And that will be, then we'll put it online, we'll get it out there, we'll get the survey out there, and we'll do our darndest to get the best numbers we can, planning for really a little bit over a month from now when we start our in school.
I just want people out in the audience to know that we're really adhering to the state schedule. We're not.
Mr. Chair, I saw there in the question that in the hybrid model, would there be 2 teachers, one for the in-person component and one for the online component? One of the sort of guiding principles, if you will, of ours was relationships. We talked about earlier, and the relationship between a teacher and a student. So it's our intent that our model follows that, and that if a child's in school in 5th grade on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday with Mrs. Jones, then Mrs. Jones is going to be doing the teaching on Thursday and Friday when that student's at home. So that classroom, if you will remain intact, whether it be in the building or at home. And the same thing with the middle school. Obviously, the high school is going to change a little bit, but it'll be the same teachers doing in school and at home.
There's a lot of very specific special education questions. And so I would really say to people that they should probably contact you, Carolyn, with specific questions about the needs of their children.
Yes, what I would recommend is that families can reach out to me. They can reach out to their special education coordinator. And I would also encourage families to participate in tomorrow's Q&A. You know, it can be difficult navigating, well, which cohort am I in and what does it look like? I would also implore families to give us a bit of time as well, because there are going to be questions that we don't fully have the answers to just yet, and will very much depend on how many families opt for remote-only instruction. So I would just, yes, by all means, reach out. Please always reach out. Two-way communication is something we feel very strongly about, but just a bit of a disclaimer that we'll do our very best to answer all the questions that you might have.
One question that came up that I haven't seen before, again, Brian, is when children have their remote learning days, will they be completing all the work online only, or will they have to have paper worksheets printed out as well?
I can answer that. Melanie, you can certainly chime in if you'd like. I really feel that it's going to look probably similar to a traditional school day. There'll be some work that's done in school, and there'll be some work that's done at home. There'll be, short and long-term assignments. There'll continue to be things like book reports and things such as that students will be working on independently. But there may be some type of related enrichment or worksheet that gets sent home, certainly. And Melanie, you can certainly chime in on that.
Within the hybrid model, on the remote days, does not mean that children have to be just engaged with the computer the entire time. We are structuring both hybrid and remote, though, to be moving together so that if we need to transition from either plan, that we are nimble enough to do so. So we don't want the remote experience being so much different than the hybrid. But to the main point of this question, in that hybrid model, if teachers can put together materials that students need that they could engage with during the remote days, so that it's not all just computer driven on the remote days within the hybrid model. But again, there would still be a large amount of time being spent on the device, because we do want the regular connections between our teachers and our students, particularly from middle school above, because the students have multiple teachers. So there will be multiple contacts to maintain those relationships that are being forged. So, it's not an ideal situation where we can say we can minimize the screen time, but we will do our best to make sure that it is reasonable while still adhering to the need for connection and direct instruction being provided by our teachers.
So the next question up is there a daily health screening check, Brian?
We're going to rely on parents to do that, to not send their children in if they're sick or if they're not feeling well. We have additional nursing staff in the building and allied health folks in the building who will be doing screening also, but we are not taking temperatures of every child. We are relying heavily on parents to do that and only send in well children, send in children that are feeling okay. Obviously, there'll be, heightened awareness of student health issues. And if a student looks like the student is not feeling well, there might be, obviously there will be, not might be, but there'd be probably a quicker reference to the nurse. And so that's why the additional nursing staff that we've brought in will assist that.
People have asked about the protocol. The protocol is listed on the document that you released tonight, and also the nurse leader will be on the conversation tomorrow, Brian.
Correct.
So I would ask that people ask about the protocol at that time, because that's probably a better place to do that.
Correct.
Greg Rowe, you had a question, my friend?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Gates, you can probably answer this question. One thing that's becoming clear is students will be remote, most students anyway, part of the week or if not the full week. Part of what we did at our last meeting was we talked about going from 180 to 170 days to allow professional development for staff. During that professional development, have you guys discussed, since it's relatively new, it was only about a week ago, but have you guys planned any training for the teachers to help make remote more meaningful and remote more engaging than it was in the spring? In the spring, it was dropped on everybody, but now with those days to plan, I think the answer is that you guys have stuff to plan and stuff to bring it up to par.
Absolutely. We need to develop our common philosophy around what blended or remote learning looks like, because we certainly didn't have the chance to do that with the sudden closure this spring. In addition to that, getting professional development in these district-approved platforms. There are a few new platforms coming that are aimed at providing, for example, we are looking at PreK for K through 5 as an online supplementary program in which students can be largely independent in their work. So with any new program that's coming on board, we have to give our teachers nuts and bolts training on that, in addition to best practices with how to implement. So we have quite a long list of topics for professional development that we know we needed to cover anyway, and we've just added to that with the need to solidify what blended learning means, as well as I said, the nuts and bolts around some of the software that we are acquiring. And if I may just elaborate on that in talking about professional development, it's not just going to be for our faculty. We plan on providing opportunities for students and families as well with any of the new platforms that we're rolling out. So, for example, ClassLink is a program that we did have this past year but was not widely utilized. It is a single sign-on solution that would manage the logins for students for, again, any of our district-acquired technology platforms. So something like learning how to access ClassLink and manage that launchpad is something that will be helpful for faculty, staff, students, and families alike. And we have every plan to be able to provide that support to all in our community.
Thank you. That sounds like it's much more robust than it was in the spring and much more dedicated and equitably distributed amongst all the students. So thank you.
Somebody asked, and I'll answer the question, that we are planning on using substitutes when we need to use substitutes, as we have in the past. The other question that I have, Brian, is if a family chooses to do fully remote or homeschooling, can they participate in extracurricular events?
I think as a district, if students are doing remote or homeschool, like the homeschool piece, I'm not sure, and Dr. Gates, you can probably help out with that. But the remote part, if a child's doing remote learning, we certainly will allow them to. They're public school students in Middleborough, so they would certainly be allowed to be on any of our teams or sports or plays, concerts, things like that. If they practice with the band, obviously, but we will certainly allow them to be involved in life of the school in as much as we possibly can. And Melanie Gates, Dr. Melanie Gates, you can talk about the homeschool piece.
Sure. Actually, the school committee policy around homeschooling does allow for families to request access to certain aspects of our school day. So the answer to that is dependent upon what the activity is and our ability to bring in homeschool students. So I can't answer that 100%, but we do make every allowance to try to involve our homeschool students. If there are things that homeschoolers are interested in accessing through the school, they should contact me directly so that I can work that out with the particular school.
Teresa.
A question just came in through my Facebook, and I was asked to find out what we're looking at as far as volunteers, but most especially PTA members, PTA president, vice president, their access to the school. What is that going to look like?
Well, I would say that we're going to try to limit adult access to the building, but regular visitors, important visitors, PTA presidents and vice presidents, if they can't meet virtually and they have to meet with a principal in person, then we'd certainly allow for that. I know that there's certain fundraising events that they do during the year. Those may be curtailed this year because of access, because of our hopefully that we're limiting the building to only certain individuals, and that's part of our safety plan. So although it's not going to be denied, it will be limited. I would tell you that, Teresa.
Okay, thank you.
Trying to keep as few adults in the building as possible, thus access.
Yep, fair. Thank you.
Brian, two similar questions. The first being, when is the first day of school?
Well, the school committee needs to make that final determination, but we traditionally were August 31st. Teachers were coming in August 31st, and students were coming in on September 1st. We've been asked or told by the commissioner that we're to put 10 days at the beginning of the year for teacher professional development and or assorted other things at the beginning of the year. So it would make sense if the school committee said Monday, September 14th would be our first day for grades 1 through 12, and then look at some alternative dates for preschool and kindergarten, usually a day or two after that, once we get situated. So I would be looking at probably either Monday, September 14th, or Tuesday, September 15th as the start of the school year.
And a related question, Brian, when can families expect two things? When can families expect to, aside from obviously remote, you sent out the date, when can families should immediately be contacting schools about what they'd like to see for days on and off, what's going to work best for them?
Well, it'll be 2 on and 3 off, and then 3 on and 2 off, depending on what cohort they're in. So cohorts are, it's going to be every other week in 2 and 3 and 3 and 2. So it really won't make too much of a difference other than families, I would say. Right. I don't know if that answers the question or not, Mr. Young.
No, I think it does. I mean, if a family needs a Monday, Tuesday cohort, then they should contact, and they know that they should contact the schools immediately and try to put in for that and see.
We could try to do that at the elementary and Nichols Middle School. No guarantees at the high school.
Do you have an idea of when teacher assignments will be out?
I would say look for them the week before school starts. Maybe 2 weeks.
Okay.
That's what we'll be doing the next month. As soon as we get answers in from folks about whether they're going to go remote or not, because that'll determine teachers, the amount of teachers, what teachers are needed to do remote, how many at each grade level. We'll be reorganizing class lists that already went home, so people will be notified. Unfortunately, people had already been notified in this situation, but in some instances, but it's good. That's all going to change. The deck has to be reshuffled.
Thank you. Rich, I'll be with you in 1 second. I want to go through my mask questions now. First of all, currently the guideline is second grade up has to wear masks.
Required.
But I will say this to everybody. The commissioner has essentially said school committees can make the choice about kindergarten, preschool, kindergarten, first and second grade.
First grade.
That will be discussed at our next meeting.
Second through 12 required. Right now, it's strongly encouraged pre-K, K, and 1, but I know there's several school committees that have said, listen, we're all going to wear masks. And I would say, and I would defer to Carolyn Lyons on this, her students that came in the summer really sort of took to the masks and took well to them, I think. Carolyn, you can certainly comment on that if you like.
Sure. I mean, we saw students, we saw a variety. We saw students who, were not able to wear it for an extended length of time. We did extensive mask breaks. And then we also saw relative success that, students with, significant disabilities able to navigate mask wearing with routine and regular practice. I would implore all families, the more that you practice with your child, the greater degree of success that even young children will have wearing their mask at school. We did have students in our extended school year program for limited time, so their sessions were about 2 hours in length, but we were very pleased with what we saw in terms of students' ability to tolerate it, with a variety of students with a variety of learning needs. So, I mean, I certainly would defer to school committee, but I'm sure that's a concern of all families, special ed, regular ed, and everything.
Caroline, one other question that came in specifically for you for the preschool.
Mhm.
For people who got notification in the lottery that they could attend the preschool, will they have a remote option, or will preschool just be in person?
All preschool will be in person. So for the lottery, you're talking about the same-aged peers. These are students without disabilities who opt into our program and kind of round out the experience there. You have that program serves students with disabilities and pairs them with same-aged peers, who are sometimes referred to as model peers. All of those experiences will be in person only, but on the schedule that they sign up for. So for example, most students are not 4 days a week in the pre-K program. They are some combination of 2 days, 3 days, or 4 days. And so that would continue, but not virtually. That has not been discussed nor planned. And I would say that the state guidance has been crystal clear with us in terms of school administrators that their expectation was to prioritize these littlest learners for in-person, taking the position that really that experience cannot be recreated virtually.
So just two more mask questions that I have that I'll answer. First was, there will be, somebody asked about mask breaks. There will be mask breaks throughout the day. It'll obviously depend, and where they are will be based on what school they're in and what's happening. The second question was, can they remove their masks at their desks? And Brian, the answer to that is no, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Oakley, you had a question before I move on to these questions, so go right ahead.
I was just going to ask, this was more about the start of school. And I know that we obviously have to build in 10 PD days, the beginning there. Does Labor Day push that a little forward? Would we be looking at a minimum of Tuesday the 15th, given Labor Day, or how does that work?
If we're looking to schedule 10 days, but I'd have to look at the calendar, which I can here.
I would also say, Brian, if I can add, there's some negotiation around how that can happen with the teachers union. And I'd like to leave it at that for the time being. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee before I move on to sort of the final few I have here? Greg Rowe, please go right ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, hopefully this answers. It's a question from Facebook that I saw. It talks about tomorrow's presentations from the administrators. Is that going to go over all the nuts and bolts of how each building is going to operate when it comes to hallway passing and bathrooms and mask breaks and lunches and that stuff? Because from my understanding, each building is different on how they're going to handle that. So that was a good question and might cover a lot of the other questions.
Well, I would say tomorrow, Greg, through you, Mr. Chair, is going to be the first in a series of these events. I think we probably need to have more than one, certainly. We can get into as much detail as we have detailed thus far, and it may not get into the real small details, but we'll be able to talk about some of the larger details, school organization, school schedule, things such as that, the first one. So.
Meg, you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Carolyn, can you talk about the process for IEP meetings and how those will happen? I know we did them virtually in the spring, but is that going to continue? Are parents going to be coming in? Can you just kind of speak to that process?
Yes, thank you. Actually, thank you very much for this question. I meant to touch on that when I was presenting earlier. Here's the thing with the team meeting process. the goal right now is to limit as much as possible the traffic in and out of buildings. In order to provide the safest experience for our kids, we really do need to limit the number of adults in and out of a building. And anybody who's ever been in a team meeting can attest to the fact that sometimes that meeting is very small, and sometimes that meeting can fill an entire queen-size table at the Middleborough High School with like close to 20 chairs in the room. So I talked with my team about this, and ultimately what I've concluded is that these team meetings need to continue in a virtual context only for now. I'm not, obviously things can change. I won't say that that's absolutely going to be the case for the entire school year, but right now it would help out each building tremendously if we're not scheduling, because some days we're running, anywhere from 4 to 5 meetings in each building per day, which when you kind of just do the multiplication of how many different adults that is in and out of the building, if you're talking about things like social distancing, the one thing that I think we've conclusively proven over the spring is that the IEP and special education team process can go on in a virtual context. One of the things I wanted to target in the first 10 days of professional development was professional development for our staff about how do we effectively run virtual team meetings. And I'd like to talk more with CPAC about this initiative as well, because admittedly it's clunky. It's not a perfect condition. It's not as good as sitting together at a table, but I think we've had very good traction with participating, not just in the IEP team meeting process, but even identifying our littlest learners, students ages 3 to 5. We've been doing transition planning conferences, which typically take place in student homes. Miss Melissa Deutschman is the one who spearheads that process, and she's been able to accomplish that in conjunction with Head Start and EI, also through a virtual platform. So right now we've been using Google Meet. I know in the past we used Zoom. And I'll certainly continue to explore that option. I know Google as a platform increased their performance criteria, kind of their performance with their entire G Suite, in part as a result of how successful Zoom was. But I think families can expect that process to continue in a virtual context. And the primary reason for that decision has been the health and safety of everybody in all 5 buildings, and a very effective way of minimizing traffic in and out of the buildings. Just on that note, we do contract with certain providers that we don't have on staff. Just to give you an example, we partner with Gosnold to provide additional counseling services here in the district. And we contract out for a teacher of the deaf, for a teacher of the visually impaired, TVI, TOD, and then also orientation and mobility providers. So we use a variety of contractors for those services. We don't have somebody on staff that provides those services. And I absolutely need those people to be reporting to our buildings. So that I want to continue. That's in student IEPs. These are services we know our students need. But if I know I'm going to have that traffic, then the IEP team meeting traffic, I'd like to keep to an absolute minimum. So hopefully that answers your question. And if families have questions or concerns about that, I would certainly invite that conversation with me personally.
Brian, I'm going to ask one more question that I see. It's sort of a generalized question. Can you explain the situation with Chromebooks that you've ordered? I know you mentioned it before.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we have ordered upwards of 2,400 units, including 2,000 Chromebooks and another 400 or so laptops. Unfortunately for us, we're getting word that some of our technology may be wrapped up in the trade war piece that's involving some 10 or 11 factories in China that assemble them, and because of forced labor at these, that the president apparently is not going to accept products from there and has sent them back. We heard from one supplier that the boat was on its way and the boat was turned back. Whether or not that's just a metaphor, I'm not sure. But I think that it's just a matter of time. It's going to be additional time. We're talking probably at least October before we receive these, hopefully sooner. But Dr. Melanie Gates has orchestrated an inventory within the tech department to really take a look at exactly how many we have. For example, at the MKG and HPB, there are 250 to 300 units in each of those two schools. So we are going to go through a priority list of outfitting as many students at home as humanly possible. The number got approached 300 during the closure, by the end of the closure. So, and some of those students still have those, but we're going to try to provide as many as possible to as many students as possible. We've also ordered some hotspots, and we received that grant, which is good. That we just got permission to receive that grant. We also got a grant through Dr. Mark Pacheco, Senator Mark Pacheco's office, for an additional group of monies that is arriving to help underserved students. So we'll be working on that too. So we're going to try to get as many as we can. The state has a possible lead on a number of laptops that we can buy from the state. So, and Dr. Gates, please, you're the technology expert here. Just kidding.
Yeah, I try to be, except when I have technical issues. But yes, unfortunately, the order that we did place, there is an issue with us being able to receive those devices for the opening of school. And we do ask that if families do happen to have a device that their child can use, it would be great if that would be allowed. I'll be working with our new network manager, Mr. Mike Mills, to revise our bring your own device policy, because I do know that many families had previously provided a device for their child, and if they would be so gracious to allow those devices to support their child's learning in school, that would be great. But we will make sure that families that need a device will get a device. We are going to start with our remote learning, our online learning academy survey that will be coming out this evening, where if families are opting for remote, we are asking them again if they need access to a device and if they need access to the internet. Obviously answer, honestly, whatever your family's need is, we are going to work diligently to make sure we take care of each and every student and provide them the resources that they need. And while we're on the topic of technology, if I may, I've seen some questions come in about Chromebooks versus Windows devices. We've chosen a Chromebook for a variety of reasons, but Windows devices are certainly compatible with the programs that we're offering. Pretty much all of the online platforms that students will engage in are going to be accessed through a web browser. So if you have a device, Windows device, a Chromebook that can get onto the internet, you should be fine. There may be some issue with certain apps on iPads, but iPads may be able to work in many aspects as well as other tablets. But again, everything is going to be web-based. So if you have a Windows device at home that your child can use, that's great. They don't need to have specifically a Chromebook. It's just we're making the decision to move largely towards Chromebooks here in the district.
So I'm going to ask one more question from outside, and then we'll move on to the school committee, and I'll seek a motion. Again, for those people watching, the actual plan will be posted online later tonight. You'll have a chance to read over the plan, and also you'll have tomorrow night's opportunity to ask more additional questions. I would also say, as we said at the beginning, if there's specific questions about your child, please get in touch with your school. And the final question is about homework. Can you talk about how homework will look primarily in the remote world going forward?
Well, I would say that there'll be additional assignments beyond the school day that one might characterize as homework. I think if we use that term, or some type of content-related enrichment, if you will. It's all homework if they're remote. So, but technically, I guess there's always going to be additional work beyond the lesson that is designed to enrich the lesson, and hopefully it's purposeful. It should be. And there's also some additional work that, for example, long-term projects such as book reports and things such as that will continue. So, Dr. Gates or Carolyn Lyons, you can certainly chime in if you'd like to that end.
Well, every effort's going to be made to replicate the school day and that school experience for students. So I would anticipate that there would be some level of homework, not busy work. But as Superintendent Lynch said, there could be longer term projects that students are working on, research papers at the secondary level and such. So I would anticipate that there is some level of homework that students will be completing.
And just to piggyback on that, what I'll say in terms, I mean, certainly the expectation would be the same for special education students. I think homework is an important part of learning. That said, if you have a student that has an accommodation related to homework, you could expect that that would continue and that the student would be entitled to that accommodation or modification in the year to come.
Thank you, everybody. With that, I'm going to ask if the school committee has any additional questions. Mr. Rowe.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. One part that we got for the return to school plan was this Appendix A, the quick reference for key actions if individuals do get COVID. I've been doing some looking up of that on the DESE. It's all from the state that's giving us this. And they were updating it as recently as 6-7 days ago. And I'm assuming they're going to update it from that point forward. In regards to testing, right now, if we were open for school today, who would be responsible for if someone was symptomatic and had a runny nose or a cough, who would be responsible for the testing for teachers and students?
I would say, and I can get help here, and we could certainly maybe get more information from our coordinator of nursing, that would fall on the individual family and the individual faculty member. It's a personal item. A personal health test is a personal item. So I would say that would be somebody we would certainly recommend and require in some cases the test be taken and positive results or negative results, be reported back to us before the person returns to work or school.
And the follow-up to that would be, and this is something that we hope never happens, but if someone does get COVID-19 or someone is exposed to someone to COVID-19, what happens to that cohort or that classroom? Do they become fully remote for that week, or that's my concern is I love this model. I love all the work that's put into this hybrid. You guys have created a system that can work that should have taken 5 years to create. You've done it in 5 weeks. And I'm just wondering what happens if someone tests positive and that pushes the whole cohort or the whole classroom into remote. What are the protocols right now for that? I'm sure they'll change, but what are you guys thinking on doing in those scenarios?
Well, we'd have to evaluate the situation. I think, obviously a deep cleaning of the room, a deep cleaning of the area. We'd have to look at exposure, what type of exposure, the length of the exposure, and obviously have to defer to the state guidelines that are coming out and continue to change, like you said, Greg, and would probably have to follow the guidelines in accordance with what they're recommending. And I think that's what we'd need to do. So.
Thank you very much.
Any other member have a question? Mr. Oak.
I know we addressed this at the last meeting, but I just wanted to maybe probe for some more specifics. Obviously, the transportation guidance that came out changed things for us, and we know how many kids per bus for the two different size buses. And on each of those diagrams, there's that little yellow dot for monitor. And I know this is optional. And I know that the idea, at least that we heard at the last meeting, was that we might seek volunteers for this. And I was wondering if there was any more specifics on that. And the only reason I'm asking is just, if kids are in a classroom and they're wearing masks, then there's obviously that oversight of the teacher. But I'm just worried about a little bit of a weak link in the transportation piece if we don't have any monitors. And I know obviously the bus drivers will pay attention to that. But I just wondered if you guys could address
Rich,
that.
that's all we have right now are our bus drivers who basically take care of our discipline on our buses and make referrals. And they make referrals to administrators on a sometimes daily basis. And we'd certainly ask that they do that referral if a child is not wearing their mask on the bus. The idea is that they're wearing the mask on us. As far as bringing in 24 monitors on our buses, we have not pursued that any further as a district. We can certainly look into that. I don't know if there would be 24 volunteers that we might find to ride the bus in the morning and the afternoon. I'm not sure if we'd be able to do that. So if it became a bus that was a consistent problem, we may have to look at that a lot closer in terms of looking at maybe some possible school personnel extending some school days for some folks that maybe need to ride the bus, whether it be ESPs or the like. And we've done that in the past occasionally with students who've needed medical assistance on the bus. So we'd have to look into that. So going back to Greg Rowe's question a little bit, before a decision is made on for a school or a school district closure, I would have to consult with DEAS. I would have to consult with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed before I went ahead and closed the school. If that is related to your question, I just let you know that. So, and obviously the school committee.
Anybody else? Seeing no one, the chair would entertain a motion to accept the administration's plan for back to school.
Moved.
Second.
Discussion. The thing I want to, and I think a lot of us, is this is not the plan that we want. I mean, the fact of the matter is we are mandated by certain state things to do in order to create a plan. And I want to say to the superintendent and the administrators, you guys did a fantastic job, given, as Greg Rowe said a few minutes ago, these plans have been changing constantly and will continue to change. This plan doesn't involve, for example, after-school sports, because we don't know what they're going to allow or what they're not going to allow until that plan comes out. And as Dees has said from the very beginning, we may have to change the plan prior to the opening of school. So, this is all based on the information that we currently have. We appreciate what you did. So I just want to thank you. And that's the point I wanted to say. With that, any further comment? Mr. Stevens.
I just want to also say relating to that, the situation keeps changing too. So the state is changing their guidance, but if the number of cases start to go up, and I think there was some language in there about if the reopening phase goes back to, let's say, phase 2, we're in phase 3 now, this could change everything again. So, that's why hopefully we're doing the best we can with the situation we have currently with the guidance we have.
Mr. Rowe.
Kind of to echo what Mr. Stevens just said, this is a fluid situation. It's changing weekly, it's changing daily. And I think that disclaimer at the beginning of the plan is important, that the district will adjust to try to do what their priority is, which is to keep the students and staff safe. And right now in Middleborough, we have low numbers, and hopefully it stays that way and it all goes as planned. But, I understand the frustration coming out that it's a month away and we're still not sure. We can all hope for the best and hope that it happens, but I do have faith and I do appreciate all the time that was put in to make this as safe as possible. And as Mr. Lynch has said a number of times, to mitigate the chances of anyone getting COVID and spreading COVID in this town. So thank you.
Seeing no one else, the motion on the table is to approve the administration's plan. Because this requires a roll call vote. Ms. Farley?
Aye.
Mr. Rowe?
Aye.
Ms. Janess?
Aye.
Mr. Stevens?
Aye.
Mr. Oakley? And the chair votes aye.
Aye.
Thank you for all your hard work, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, next on my report is an introduction to you and the committee of a face coverings policy. As you know, and Teresa, you're a new member, but MASC, Mass Association of School Committees, has organized generally a policy book for every community in the Commonwealth, and they develop through their lawyer, I believe it's Steve Finnegan, right, Mr. Young?
Yes.
through their attorney. They utilize the laws, and they basically take the laws and they make them into school policies, which become law. And this is their first effort at just a sort of a guideline policy on face coverings. What if you'll see in probably within a month or two, this will be the policy or very close to it for most of the school systems in the Commonwealth. And what this is for, as an introduction to you, is a proposed policy based on the guidance that's been provided by DEACE and the CDC and the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. So this is for you to review. As of this evening, I believe we will have a policy subcommittee, and that will be their next step to take a look at this and then sort of look at it, discuss it, and then send it back to the committee. Time is of the essence with regard to this. So, and occasionally policies don't have to go through 3 readings. So I would hope, Mr. Chair, that you might waive that in this case, if we can agree on a policy, agree on the terminology for the policy. So this is the first go around. As you know, it's pretty consistent with what we've talked about. And there's also a piece in there, these can be changed locally. So it says in here, exempted from this policy are students in grade 1 and below. We can include them in this policy. So that's entirely up to the school committee. This is this would be our policy. This is not required by the state. As long as we don't change the law that's within the policy, we're in a good place. So, Mr. Chair, I can defer to you on this.
Yeah, so we put up the policy because it's the first one we saw, given the fact that we are going to have students with masks and what we need to do around there. It made sense to put this out for an initial reading tonight to take a look at. Afterwards, we'll assign it to the policy subcommittee. Generally, readings go through 3 readings. It's my intention, and the superintendent and I talked about this earlier, this policy will get posted on the district's webpage so that people have a chance to look at it, knowing full well that it will be people will want to see what the policy looks like. Also, on top of it, it is my intention to discuss preschool through 1st grade and face coverings at our next meeting. Okay? So that'll obviously change and alter the policy somewhat. The other thing is the superintendent mentioned, given that this is new and a requirement by the state, we don't necessarily have to go through the formal 3rd reading, primarily because we need a policy surrounding. But I would also say that the plan is to meet the 20th. So in theory, we could have the policy, and we met early September, we could have the policy in place before school began. So we could go through 3 readings too. So it's up to the board about that particular piece. But I do want to, I just wanted to put this out here to see, and if anyone had any question or comment on it. Otherwise, there will be more time for that, but I just wanted everyone to take a look at it because I thought it was important.
This policy did just come out the other day.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so the only other thing I'll tell you, it's our normal. So this policy has been vetted through, obviously, MASC attorneys. The only thing I do differently is if we alter a policy in some way, then I vet it through our attorney to make sure that we haven't altered it in some way that's going to be problematic for us. Okay. Any questions? Then if no one objects, the chair will entertain a motion to turn this over to the policy subcommittee.
Motion.
So moved.
So moved.
Okay. I have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, and we'll go in order. Ms. Farley.
Aye.
Mr. Rowe.
Aye.
Ms. Janess.
Aye.
Mr. Oakland.
Aye.
Mr. Stevens.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And so you'll find out who that is in a minute. Go ahead, Mr. Lynch, please.
Okay, next on the agenda is some exciting news. I'm happy to report that Mrs. Latenda, the new principal at the Nichols Middle School, has an energy level that's on high all the time, which is great. And as you know, we've been looking forward to sort of the report out from the scheduling committee that's there, and she's been there probably 4 weeks, 5 weeks. She's met with them, and she has a recommended schedule for you, a recommended schedule change, and a presentation for you this evening for your vote. This was born out of negotiations which occurred last year with the teachers, and the desire to change the schedule to Nichols Middle School. Again, this is something that could be a year schedule, and they may tweak it and come back to us next year as a committee. It's a representative committee as per the terms of the negotiations, and it's going to come before you tonight. I would ask that Mrs. Latender be invited onto the stage. I know she was waiting. I do see a presentation there. We can pull that up, I guess, to have it on the screen. It's a very nice. I'm going to text Mrs. Latender. Hopefully everything is okay with her.
We're waiting for hype. Mr. Lynch, if you don't mind, I'm just going to move on to the school committee's assignments while we're waiting.
Go right ahead, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. So I had sent out the school committee assignments for everybody, and just so everybody knows, I will just go through them briefly. Negotiations subcommittee is myself and Mr. Stevens. The budget subcommittee is Meg and Mr. Oakley. Facilities subcommittee is the two Gregs. The sick bank committee is myself, because we're also represented by the superintendent and our business manager. The policy subcommittee is Ms. Janess and Teresa. The superintendent evaluation subcommittee is Mr. Stevens and Meg. The community engagement subcommittee is Teresa and Meg. The student engagement subcommittee is myself and Teresa. The social media subcommittee is Mr. Stevens and Mr. Oakley. Technology subcommittee is Mr. Oakley and Mr. Rowe. Athletics is Greg and Ms. Farley. And the COVID-19 subcommittee is myself and Mr. Oakley. So that covers our subcommittees. I had sent them out over the weekend for everybody. I didn't get anyone to yell at me, so I'm very pleased with that. I think I did an okay job. And as I said before, I want to thank everybody. These are not sort of the traditional committees that I have sat on in some respects. We've been able to, you were asked to pick up pieces, and I'm very happy with that. And a lot of you have worked on the previous committees with me, and I'm looking forward to it. So thank you to everybody. Mr. Lynch, do we have Mrs. Latender in?
We're good.
All right.
Grand entrance, there she is.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Latender. Mrs. Latender, can I just say first and foremost, the superintendent mentioned it briefly, but I was in the superintendent's office with the superintendent when you called us and told us that you had already taken care of this, and both the superintendent and I were amazed at the speed and ability of you to take care of this so quickly, having been in the position for now less than 2 months. So we really appreciate you handling this piece for us. This has been something that we've talked about for quite some time, and obviously the union has talked about and thought so much of it that they needed to put it in the contract. So we thank you for your efforts in this.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and School Committee, and Mr. Lynch. Thank you for the opportunity to share what we have accomplished in this short time, but I have to give credit to the team of people that I worked with, and they were very diligent in brainstorming and going home and thinking about our ideas that we had vetted out at the table, and then emailing different options, and then we'd meet again. So we've been meeting for the past couple months weekly on a voluntary basis. So we've had a great team, and this was the original scheduling committee that was put forth early on before me before I came up on to Nichols Middle School. So along with the assistant principals, Mr. Rothmich and Mr. Hancock, and some teachers, which I'll share their names in the end, we've worked together mostly through June and July to follow up with a proposal to share with you that we feel is going to meet our needs currently moving forward for this year. As a committee, we started with a few goals, which could be on slide 2. Last year's schedule was a 7-day rotating schedule with a drop day, which was very confusing for students and also confusing for some staff. Not that it was confusing, they understood the schedule, just each day they had to look up at what their day was going to look like. And we felt that if that was challenging for teachers or just something that they needed to look at, it wasn't advantageous for our students either. So we wanted to provide a more consistent and predictable schedule for students, increase time on learning by eliminating that drop day, and provide students the opportunity to prepare themselves to begin and end their day without being rushed, and to get organized and ready for their day. And we also want to assist students with building their independence and organizational skills. And we'd also like them to build time to develop a classroom community and foster their relationships with students and faculty. And we added a extended block or an extension block in the morning that I'll discuss further. So if you could switch to the next slide, please. Thank you. So our 6-day rotating schedule will be A through F, opposed to our A through G day that we had previously. The periods will be 50 minutes, with the extension block starting at the beginning of the day, which is 39 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then we'll also have more time to transition between lunches. There'll be less crowding in the hallways and allows time for the cleanup, which will actually work out very well for our custodial staff and our cafeteria ladies, considering what we're faced with this year with COVID. We'll also have a 5-minute homeroom time for students to end their day. The scheduling committee found that our students were rushing from one end of the building to the other at the end of the day to get their belongings and get organized and know what to bring home for homework or what they needed. And we felt that if we gave children a few minutes at the end of the day to figure out what it is they need to pack and get organized, it'll just help them be more successful. So those were some of the considerations for the new proposed changes. Next slide, please. So a sample unified art schedule. This also positively impacts our unified art schedule. So this is a sample of a team, the Beacons and Explorers team. So at 12:36 to 1:26, that will be the Beacons unified art schedule every day at that time. So the unified art schedule stays static. So if you're the homeroom teacher for Beacons homeroom 1, you can see that the students go to music on A day, and then art, and then PE, but then it repeats itself, music, art, PE. And some of the courses, the UA classes, are trimestered. So the students will have exposure to all of them. It will just rotate by trimester. And this gives our UA teachers an opportunity to get to know their students and engage more with their content area with their students. And one of our goals here is to have our students be seen by their teachers in the morning. So if I'm a student in math class, I might on A and B day have math in the morning, but on C and D day, I might have math in the middle of the day, and F and G day, maybe have math at the end of the day. Our teachers really like to see students at different times of day because depending on the time of day, you might see a different student and their engagement and interest level might be different depending on their well-being and how they're feeling that day. So the UA schedule will stay consistent, and then we'll be able to flip-flop. The AB day will be the same, CD will be the same, EF will be the same, but with the UA class staying the same time every day, which provides for consistency. Next slide, please. The extension block in the morning is homeroom based. So we are going to put all our students in a homeroom, and this year, because of the COVID situation, they'll stay together as a homeroom. But the goal for this is that students will have a homeroom that they will be in for 39 minutes every day. They go in, they get settled, they get organized, and we'll, it's similar to the dial block, but it won't run the same as the dial block. And this will provide different opportunities throughout the day. We plan on having our guidance counselors can conduct their social skills groups or meet with students first thing in the morning. So our students can be more available and ready to learn and access the curriculum and just maybe start their day on a better note if they need that support. And then students who signed up for band, orchestra, and choir will attend during the extension block. So that will be first period. So 6th grade will go on A and B day, 7th grade will be C and D day, and then E and F day will be for 8th grade students. And this will allow these music students to also attend their UA classes with their peers, their classroom. Next slide, please. Next slide, Sean, please. Thank you. So in the past, we had about 11 homerooms with 9 UA teachers. And so the 11 homerooms would dump into 9 homeroom, say that again. So it'd be 11 homerooms going, 9 homerooms, I'm saying it backwards, 11 homerooms going into 9 UAs. Sorry about that. And the class sizes would be really high, and some students will be mixed with each other that were intentionally left to be separated just for different reasons. So this helps minimize the class size in the Unified Arts class, so students have a better experience that would be more positive and more manageable. And then students are attending by their homeroom. There are, students would attend Unified Arts with their team, but 5 homerooms will split into 6 UAs, which means that there'll be a class or a few students from each class that make that 6th cohort for the UA. Please note that that probably won't be happening with the COVID situation, just trying not to mix students and contact tracing reasons. So the teams will have an opportunity to co-plan daily. So the whole team will go to a Unified Arts at the same time. So those team of teachers, like the Apollos or Beacons, they can plan together if they so choose during that 6-day rotating cycle. Art, Tech, and STEM are trimester together. So if you start first trimester in art, then you go to tech, then you go to STEM, then vice versa. Same with Music 1, Music 2, and Health. So all classes will meet 2 times in the 6-day cycle, which is more predictable for students. So students will be engaged in 3 UAs in 1 trimester and 3 different UAs in the following trimester. As I mentioned before, the UA class, the Unified Art class, will be the same time every day for each team. We did have one request from one of the committee members who helped build this schedule if you look at our 6th grade schedule, students have 4 periods in a row without a break. So what we might do as a team is look at the schedule and have our 6th and 7th grade students flip-flop a trimester so that they have a little more of a break in their day. And so that would flip-flop their UA. So that's something the committee will continue to meet throughout the year based on your recommendations and approval to see what we can do to make that happen. So our students have a little more of a break, especially our 6th graders coming into the Nichols Middle School for the first time. Next slide. So here is our proposed timeline schedule. We have homeroom would be that 7:55. That's when the late bell rings. Students do come to school usually around 7:35. They enter the building and they'll be in their homeroom earlier, but the late bell rings at 7:55, and that's when that extension block would start. As you can see, we have 3 lunches. Grade 6 will go together, grade 7, grade 8, 30-minute lunches, about 20 minutes in between each lunch period. The schedule is pretty much the same, except for period 3 and 4 vary as far as a bell schedule goes between 6th and 7th and 8th grade. And then they're back on track with the same type of schedule, 5th and 6th grade. And then there's the 5-minute homeroom piece that I spoke of earlier. Next slide. This is our scheduling committee. Megan Enos as our physical education teacher. She's also our department head for the Unified Arts. Amy Anderson is a 7th grade math teacher and also a department head for the math team. Miss Wendy Conant is our 6th grade ELA teacher. Miss Jay McGowan Chung is also our social studies 8th grade teacher, but also our social studies department lead teacher this past year, and our 2 assistant principals and ourselves. I would also like to make note that in the very beginning slide, if you notice the time on learning, we gained 222 minutes. And if you divide by 15-minute periods, that provides about 4.5 additional hours of learning in that one content area for our students. So these are all the things that we were hoping to accomplish. I feel like we did a pretty good job of accomplishing those things. We did have parameters in which we had to abide by based on contract and contract language. But when I have spoken to other UA teachers and other teachers, they seem pretty excited about this new proposed schedule based on your recommendation, and any questions or feedback that you have for me. I'd be happy to engage your questions.
Mrs. Latender, the one question I have, just to make sure, because this was contractual, this is the recommendation of that whole
That is
committee?
correct.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Any questions from Mrs. Latender? Ms. Janess?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had one question, one comment. So I know that you have the scheduling committee, but is this something that's been presented to the whole staff and you've gotten feedback from staff and what they think about it?
This has not been presented formally to the entire staff. I know a lot of teachers already know about it because they've been talking to each other and they have their group chats. And I've been meeting with every staff member from the Nichols Middle School as part of my transition here. And many of the teachers that I have spoken with, I have shared the schedule with. And I haven't heard any concerns yet, but that doesn't mean I won't hear some concerns or questions in that regard.
I would also add to that Mrs. Latender, the superintendent, and I had talked about.
Okay.
Sorry.
And then my comment is, I love the extension block, especially where we've been out and we know that kids are going to need support. So having that extra time to kind of check in with them.
You're welcome.
Is
I just
awesome.
feel
So
like
thank you
that
for that.
period helps students get ready for their day. And we're going to plan and organize Character Strong an advisory period. So A day would be 8th grade, and then B day would be 7th, and C day would be 6th grade. That Character Strong would be happening. And then our UA teachers would push into those homerooms to be part of the Character Strong, so they know what the language is and we can carry it across the whole school and across all disciplines. And it also provides our UAs an opportunity to provide, additional music, art, or phys ed to some of our sub-separate populations, in addition to them participating within their homeroom or with their colleagues and peers. But some students might need a smaller setting to feel more comfortable and be more successful. So we have a lot of wiggle room with that block, and also provide maybe some extensions. And it'll be more teacher driven of where students go with that first period, and it provides for more accountability.
I just wanted to add to that this group will stay in place to continue through the year to make sure that if there are issues, if there are things that need to be looked at, they can continue to monitor it and be a part of it. And that's part of the contract too. Mrs. Farley, you had a question?
Yeah, more of a comment. Just as a parent who's had 2 children go through the middle school, the dial was never really something that was great. So I actually love seeing that you've changed it a little bit, and that extended block sounds really great. It sounds like it's going to be much more conducive to group learning and just being together more and building on Character Strong. So thank you so much for all this work. This is amazing. I love seeing this schedule. It really just looks so much better. And now I'm kind of sad I don't have a middle schooler yet.
I'm sure Katie will be coming up soon.
You will. You'll be ready for her, I'm sure.
Yeah, but,
Thank you.
No, thank you very much for your comments and your feedback. I really owe a lot of credit to the team, and Megan Enos and Wendy Conant were very instrumental in building out the block schedule and doing the math and figuring everything out. And, Amy Anderson and Jamer were very instrumental in helping this be put together. So it was definitely a team effort, and our goal was to continue to meet throughout the year to vet anything out, that if there's some things not working, we can have the best laid plans and think things will go a certain way, but then we might find bumps in the road and we will adjust accordingly and figure that out. But that's the process of the plan we have for now. Thank you.
Mr. Oakley, you had a question.
Sure. Thanks for the presentation. The increase in minutes sounds great. And I hope you'll indulge me as someone who is not a teacher and does not have any kids and hasn't looked at a school schedule for a long time, aside from, of course, the high school schedule. Can you help me understand how going from a 7-day, well, first of all, what is a drop day? What was the drop day previously?
So the drop day was that they would drop one content day in the 7-day rotating schedule. And I think it allowed for all the classroom teachers to go to a PLC, a professional learning community, for team planning twice a week in every grade. And then also the 7th day made it work for the UAs to have that common planning time. So I still can build that in. We still have that flexibility to build that time in, but not twice in a 7-day rotation. It'd be once in a 6-day rotation to provide that opportunity. And then the plan would be to add the third staff meeting a month where they can work together as a team.
Gotcha. And Mr. Chair, if it's okay, just to follow up on that. So if I understand right, then the fact that there was a drop day previously means that going from a 7-day rotation with the drop day down to a 6 with no drop day means that there's actually no loss in variety of classes over the 6-day period, right? It's still essentially the same.
Correct. It's a more predictable and consistent schedule. And every day you'll have your math, your ELA, your science, and your social studies, as opposed to dropping one of those content areas each day.
Got it. All right. Thank you very much. Sounds great.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, then the chair will entertain a motion to approve the plan for this coming year.
So moved.
So
I
moved.
have a so moved in second. Any comments before we go to the vote? Then this will require a vote. Mr. Stevens. Ms. Janess.
Aye.
She's frozen.
I think she's frozen. Mr.
Hey,
Oakley.
you should come back to
Aye.
Meg.
Mr. Rowe.
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Farley. Ms. Farley, excuse me.
Aye.
A long day.
Aye.
Meg, you are back. We are voting on the plan.
I think she said it.
Sorry.
She said aye.
Oh, sorry.
She did say aye.
The chair votes aye. The plan passes. Thank you very much. This is intended.
Thank you.
Thank
Nice
you all
job,
very
Mrs.
much.
Littender. Deserve a jump in the pool. Mr. Chair, that concludes my report this evening.
Excellent. Then we already did this subcommittee assignments. So next up is the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'd make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented. Is
Do I
that
hear
how
a
I say it?
Yep. That's do I hear a second? The consent agenda is just the warrants that we've paid in the past. Mr. Stevens? Mr. Oakley?
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Janess?
Aye.
Ms. Farley?
Aye.
Mr. Rowe?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. A couple things. We do not need an executive session tonight. And our next meeting currently will be August 20th. That's provided the state doesn't come up with something that we need to meet earlier with. So let you know in about a week. But that's the current plan, to meet the 20th and go from there. Any questions or comments before I take a motion to adjourn? Does anyone have anything they want to add? I do want to say one thing. Oh, Rich, go right ahead, then I'll go.
Yeah, sure. I just didn't want to let a meeting pass without, again, saying how thankful I am as a citizen and school committee member to Mr. Lynch and his team for putting all this together in the period of time that they did. And it looks like the public is pretty supportive as well with all the comments. So thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Oakley, through you, Mr. Chair. And I, again, defer to my team. Outstanding job. A great group of administrators.
It did. I do want to add one thing, that the superintendent, we got a list of questions off the question site from somebody, and I just want to go through one of their questions. And the person asked, will taxes go down to reflect less use of schools, lights, buses, teachers, etc.? And what I want to say is there's no less use of anything for us. We're still going to, there is still children in the school 5 days a week. The lights are on all the time. We're planning on using our entire teacher force, our entire special ed force, our entire teacher aid force to make this plan work. We will probably require more busing because the buses don't even take half the buses, half the students on the bus now based on the rules. In addition, we know we've had to pay for certain supplies and certain things that we bought. But there were the things that we bought were based, I think, Brian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, some of the buys we bought were based on a 12-week cycle because that's what the requirement was when we bought them and we had COVID money from the feds.
That's correct, and we've ordered more too.
Right, and so the order, some of it's beyond, so if we go beyond those 12 weeks, it's additional monies that we have to take out of what we have currently. We already know, we've had a conversation with Hutch about looking at what he might need for additional custodial help. We've already talked to the superintendent about, as he said before, about there might be a need for additional nursing help. So these price tags for us aren't going down. And that's what I want to say more than anything else. And if anyone else wants to say anything, please feel free. Thank you. And with that, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
Wait a
moved.
second.
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 Again, this requires roll call. Ms. Farley?
Aye.
Mr. Rowe?
Aye.
Ms. Janess? Mr. Oakley?
Aye.
Mr. Stevens? And the chair
Aye.
votes aye. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you the 20th.
Megan just said aye.
Okay.